You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cricket Podcast for part 2 of this week's episode. We actually might have a bonus episode later in the week, focusing on the 100 in a bit more detail. But for now, we're going away from England's premier domestic tournament to Ben Stokes, India being a shambles, and a bit more. But first, Max, a little word from our sponsor, our friends at Manscaped. They've got a new product, and it's a pretty good product. Tell us more.
Absolutely. It's big news. It's big news. It's breaking news. Manscaped now has beard products. Not just all the ball stuff. They're once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard that I can see you have delightfully there, Jack. And you can make it look like never before. And you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the code CricketPod for 20% off and free shipping. We exchanged goods on Wednesday at the Oval. There's a lovely picture on our Twitter.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
The box of the beard hedger. But I'd used it on Saturday for the first time before going to a wedding because I wanted to look groomed as you do for someone's big day, and it was good. It was better than the one I was using before, so that's a step in the right direction, isn't it?
It is. That's what you want to hear. Yeah. I can vouch for it too. I actually trimmed up yesterday evening. I went for a different shave length for the face, so it doesn't perfectly match the drapes, at least in terms of hair length, but did a perfect job. I was very happy with it. Quick, easy to use, consistent trim. Really liked it. Max, what more do people need to know if they need to get their hands on one?
Well, they just need to know that they need to head over to manscaped.com. They need to get the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, get it in their basket because that comes with a bunch of other good stuff: beard shampoo, conditioner, beard oil, beard balm, all the things to rub on your face. Pop in the code CricketPod and you will get 20% off and free shipping.
Yes, it's good. Right, Max, the big news outside of the 100, I think, from an England point of view anyway, is that Ben Stokes appears to be making a sensational return to the England ODI teams in a move that literally nobody could predict. Even the people that kept saying it was definitely going to happen are shocked. To see Ben Stokes back, considering an England call-up. I don't know if it's been 100% officially confirmed by the man himself, but the Telegraph did run a breaking news story about 20 minutes before we started recording saying that he was coming back. First question, Max, are you happy to hear this from an England point of view?
I am actually, because ODI cricket, I think, is the one that he should have stuck with. I think I know we won the T20 World Cup, but I think T20 is probably the format where England can most live with not having Ben Stokes around. I think the one-day side really benefits from having a bit of Ben Stokes in the middle order, especially when you've lost Owen Morgan in that engine room, the left-handed aspect, the ability to basically play the game as it's needed. He can approach it in different ways. He can rebuild. He can go big or aggressively if he needs to. He's just got that ability to play different situations that is quite rare, really, isn't it? At the top level of cricket. Obviously, England have some phenomenal players to draw on and outstanding depth in that middle order, but there's just something a bit extra about Ben Stokes that I think works really nicely in that side, and I think it helps the balance of that middle order, and it will be hopefully a good thing for England. I am worried. I'm worried for his knees.
Well, the word on the street is that he's gonna come back in a batting only capacity, and I don't really have a problem with that for a trip to India. I think he helps England massively, to be honest. I don't think that people really appreciate how good a player he is, and I think particularly in a situation, or in the situation that England have struggled with most in the last 2 or 3 years. England have become a little bit brittle on the batting front. Their rampant period between 2015 and 2019, a lot of that, it was built on Bairstow and Roy going ballistic in the power play and treating that like a personal destruction derby. And obviously down the order, you have Butler and Moeen and basically anyone, even Liam Plunkett, could knock it around, couldn't he? Wokes, Owen Morgan kicking that off. But really, a lot of the success was built on the ability of Joe Root and Ben Stokes and then Owen Morgan to all average in the 60s and score at sort of roughly 90 per 100 balls. All three of them could do that in the overs sort of 10 through to 40. So the whole of the middle of the game, England had three guys that would score, mega runs and do it really, really quickly. And if you have a look, you can pull this data up on somewhere like Crickmetric. If you look at the players that can do that, it's a very, very short list. Virat Kohli, obviously one of them, Babar Azam, another one. Not a lot else. I call them the middle over cruisers. That's they're playing what in T20 would kind of be described as an anchor, except that in T20 you don't really need these guys. In ODI cricket, the name of the game for 30 overs is to try and score about a run a ball, which you throw in some extras there, and they basically do, to set up the last 15 where you can release the beasts and they can go ballistic. Then you mentioned it yourself. If you have a look at Stokes and isolate what he does in the last 10 overs, he averages 30 at a strike rate of 130. So he has the ability, in other words, to ramp it up. And if you look in ODI cricket at the number of people that can do that, it's not that many. You'd think it would transfer over directly from T20, but there aren't. There just aren't that many guys who can. There are some guys, obviously here who can go quicker than that. I was looking earlier. Glenn Maxwell's ballistic. Joss Butler is off the charts in that period of the game. Moeen Ali has got that gear to him as well, which is maybe why he's a slightly underrated player himself in ODI cricket. But the fact that Ben Stokes can be effectively not quite as good as Joe Root, but nearly as good as Joe Root for 30 overs in the middle, and then has the extra kick on, makes him such a valuable batter. I don't really think England will miss his bowling too much.
No,
it adds flexibility.
Yeah,
adds flexibility, but the all-round batting skills, a terrific ODI player.
Well, especially in India as well, because you'll have Moeen Ali. You'll probably, you might use Joe Root a bit. You'll already have Adil Rashid in there, and you might have Liam Livingstone as well. I think, there is a question about how he fits in. Probably it's bad news for Dawid Malan or Ben Duckett, because you'd think that they're going to start with Roy and Bairstow, and then it'll be Root, and then it'll be Stokes. And then I think they'll want to play Butler obviously they'll want to play Butler, but I think they'll want Butler, Livingston and Moeen Ali all in the team. I think England struggled to get them in without a player as good as Stokes able to help set them up. And I think him coming into the team, there's all the leadership. It's a bit of ballast, isn't it? They were just coming in too early. That was the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really good for England. Edges them maybe slightly closer to India for best team in the tournament. I still think India, ODI wise at home, the favourites. But we're looking, let's say India are going to win that World Cup 30% of the time. England probably up to about 25. And then there's maybe a little gap to Australia, who I'd have as third favourite. Also interesting that it seems that they are at least going to name Jofra in the preliminary squad. I don't know if you have a take on that one. I like the move personally, but
if they think he's got a chance of being there, then he should 100% be included in the conversation, because he's class. Even if he's been on the back of injury, he showed in the few games he did play in the IPL that on the back of not much cricket, he was still a real handful. And England, they're not going to be able to play their fast bowlers every game. Mark Wood's not going to be able to play every game. Every other fast bowler that England try and bring in ends up with a broken foot or back. So might as well have a go with Jofra Archer as well. Makes perfect sense.
I think if England could get Jofra to play 5 of the matches, including the 2 knockout matches, hopefully, that would be a
Mm.
massive boost to them. He just has skills that other players don't have, and I
Yeah.
think with the other seamers available, I don't know who exactly they'll take. Topley, Wokes, and Wood probably the top choices. You should
Yeah.
be able to cycle through and basically pick whichever one of them isn't in form or is struggling the most in Indian conditions.
Or
Drop
is
them
fit.
to the yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that is a reality. So I think two quite aggressive selections from England there, and I think two that could really pay off. Could also backfire. I mean, if Stokes breaks his knee and then is out of the India Test series or something like that, that would be a disaster. And obviously, Archer comes with a lot of injury baggage himself. So, who knows? Max, that's England update. There's some other stories in world cricket that I wanted to get to as well. Devil Brevis has been called up for the South Africa T20 side. Are you excited to see that?
Yeah, I mean, he
or
ended
ODI
up behind,
or white ball side.
he ended up behind Tristan Stubbs in the most exciting South Africa young player in the international side race. That really familiarly named competition that really rolls off the tongue. He was the big one out of the World Cup, wasn't he? That ended up, he got picked up first by Mumbai Indians in the IPL. So he was one everyone was excited to see. Then Tristan Stubbs came along and ended up being the one that actually got picked and looked quite good. So it'd be nice to see Devil Brevis get his chance. I mean, both of them, on their day have looked pretty exciting. So yeah, it should be good stuff.
I mean, South Africa on the quiet, shaping up to have a pretty decent team.
They always do, don't they? They always do. And then they get to the high stakes, and it all goes wrong.
But I think South Africa, I not to go back too far, but I'd probably had New Zealand down as the dark horse for the last World Cup. I think South Africa, maybe Bangladesh, are the two outsider chances here. After I think the big four, mentioned three of them, Pakistan I'd have as probably fourth favourites at the moment. But I do think that South Africa could do something, and I think Devil Brevis could make himself part of that. I'm just going to mention it. Don't expect a comment. Steve Finn has retired from cricket. I think he's played for a year, but he had his moments.
fully focused on his media career now.
Yeah, so goodbye to him. And then India lost the decider. So last week, Ross and I were talking. They were 2-0 down in their T20 series against the West Indies. They ended up going down 3-2 after they were basically comprehensively crushed in the final T20. I think they won by 8 wickets, West Indies.
They did.
So a few things going on here. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad stuff that India did, and I think the teams they picked were weird, and I think the way they played was weird, and we can get into all of that. But I also think that a decent amount of credit has to go to West Indies for sorting themselves out to some extent in one of the formats, giving a major nation beating a major nation. I think it's the first bilateral series win against India for 17 years. And it shows that they can still throw a punch or two when they get their big names out, doesn't it, Max?
Yeah, and it wasn't like they were playing. It wasn't the first choice side that India put out by any stretch. But when you look at particularly the batting lineup they put out, I mean, it's not far off a bunch of guys that you'd be quite happy to have in an India side. It's not their first choice side, but if you actually sat down and looked at all the Indian domestic talent and thought about who you'd actually want in your T20 side, it's probably not far off in terms of the batting lineup. I think opening with Jaiswal and Shubman Gill, yeah, I'd much rather have that than Rohit Sharma. There's no Kohli in there, but there is also Sky and Sanju Samson and Tilak Varma, who's been a revelation since he's come in. So it's not like they've been, and Hardik Pandya obviously is in there, so they're not. Yeah. They're not playing a bunch of guys who they've just brought in for a laugh. This is a proper India side, maybe a bit light on the seam bowling, but they've like you said, they've put them to the sword in that 5th game. It was a weird series, wasn't it? Because basically it it was either unbelievably tight or you
Yeah.
got absolutely battered. There was no sort of close-ish games. It was a real. There were 7 wickets, 9 wickets, 8 wickets, 2 wickets, and 4 runs. They were the margins of victory in those games. So really topsy-turvy, really strange. But it's really nice to see West Indies do something after the ignominy of not qualifying for the World Cup. And I mean, there's some. You look at the names in there as well. I mean, they're the guys that have performed in the IPL. Quite a lot of them are there. Carl Mayers, Puran, Robin Powell, Shimon Hetmeyer, Shepherd, Jason Holder, Akil Hussain got a contract and barely played. Odear Smith, obviously completing the lineup. And Obed McCoy, they're proper T20 players. Like this West Indies T20 side isn't far off being a handy unit, and obviously they've shown that. It's just so bizarre that everything else has gone so horribly wrong for them. But maybe this is something to build on for the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, it could be Hetmeyer back in the mix as well, which is good for them. They're at home, aren't they, for the next T20 World Cup? So
yeah,
but there's reasons to be hopeful if you're a West Indies fan there. That's a talented bunch of players. From an India point of view, I think it's same old story to some extent. I just like, for all of the kind of new selections, they're still playing like a kind of weird brand of cricket, and everyone scores slower than they should, and nobody in the team obviously has a role to cause sort of wanton destruction. And you saw this in quite a few of the matches where things petered out a little bit if it didn't start really well, which has been India's problem for a while. And I think on the bowling side as well, it's a little bit different in the last game where they picked 2 leg spinners, and they were quite aggressive, but things didn't quite pan out for them, and they went for some wacky bowling changes to try and get things changed with Jaiswal. But Jaiswal bowled over and Akshar Patel bowled over, which I didn't really understand why they bowled the same number of overs. I don't really get what you're getting out of that. Anyway, long story short, basically my take on India for this series, they're a team that basically have a ceiling on both sides of the ball. Like, they don't take enough wickets, I don't think, to be a real threat in terms of bowling teams out cheap, like, say, Pakistan can and do with Shadab and Shaheen Afridi and Haris Rauf, more or less just bowling to get people out. And then on the batting side, they aren't a team who you think are regularly going to go beyond, say, 200 runs. They're very regularly going to finish with sort of these middling-ish totals in the 170s to maybe 190 top end. That they seem to be very oriented around that, which I think is sort of fine if you have the bowling part, but they don't really have the bowling part. They pick guys who I would say overall are a bit too defensive for on the speaking of bowling here for that tactic to work. And we were talking about it earlier off air. Like, there's a lot of guys in that team who don't get in comparable or big nation sides based on their batting or the bowling, and in some wouldn't get in. And India are trying to sort of jam them in as all rounders. And I'm thinking here, it might sound a bit harsh, but I think Akshar Patel's sort of one of them. Like, he isn't a good enough bowler when it comes to taking wickets to get into a really elite T20 side. And he isn't a good enough batter in terms of how explosive he can be to get into a really good T20 side. So you just count yourself on both sides of the ball. You've got a guy who isn't going to take that many wickets and a guy who isn't going to score that quickly. Even if the whole package is quite nice, and if you were like Delhi Capitals or whatever, you'd be like, yeah, he's pretty useful. He's going to balance out my domestic team pretty well. It doesn't translate internationally. And I think this is a restriction of the Indian player pool to some extent, because they have actually made some changes here. It's either a restriction of the player pool that when they get to international cricket and they face like an all singing, all dancing attack that they can't push on, or tactically speaking, they're limiting themselves. I'm not sure which it is. I don't know if you've got a take.
No, but it just feels like so you can sides in T20 cricket. You've got, I suppose, if you take England as an example, they're a side that basically they can win a game with just their batting. They'll put a team to the sword. And Pakistan was a good example of what you said. They're a team that could just win a game with their bowling. I think New Zealand would have been a side like that when you had, Trent Bolt at the peak of his powers and that side of thing. And in India aren't a side that are going to do either of those things, especially without Jasprit Bumrah. Obviously, that's a huge miss, and something
even
that they've been used to having in the last few years. But you don't look at that and see a team that is either going to put a team to the sword with one or other aspect of their game. And I think you're right. It's almost like they've got a bunch of players that are balancing out some extremes that don't exist.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're a good team. They are a good team, and just because of the quality of player, they will be consistently fighting for tournaments, and they may well win the World Cup next year because there aren't actually that many other good teams around. But I think for them to win the World Cup, they'd need not a huge amount of luck, but maybe a little bit of luck to make the playoffs. They'd probably be a favourite to finish in the top 4 of the Super 6 or however the format works next year. But I wouldn't nail them on in the same way that I would for England. And that probably means that in the semi-finals, they're going to have to beat at least one team where they aren't the favourite. And that makes winning a tournament quite hard. And I think they're just sort of a slightly capped team. You look at the career of Hardik Pandya, and I think that's the best sort of example of this. Like a guy who was tailor-made to be the man that batted number 6, and was India's Tim David. And they're like, that partly because of the IPL, and partly maybe because they don't understand how the game really works. They've turned him into sort of a reasonably dynamic anchor. Like not even. There just aren't that many occasions when he does go ballistic anymore, and you can say he's got it in his locker to do that, but if you aren't doing it all the time, if you aren't playing like Clarkson or Miller or Joss Buttler, maybe not Joss Butler's maybe a slightly different, Liam Livingstone, then are we to really expect you to do it when the chips are down? I don't know. I think it's asking a lot. Anyway, Max, that's we've gone a little bit longer than we expected. Anything else you would like to say about cricket?
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. I'm all cricketed out. Let's take
a break. Yeah. Let's wrap it up and have. When I say break, I mean let's end the show
for a few days. Yeah.
Final reminder: you can find us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram. We're sponsored by Manscaped. You can use the code 20% off. You can use the code Cricket Pod for 20% off plus free shipping. And if you really like what we're doing, head over to patreon.com/the Cricket Pod, and from just $5 a month or £5, I think it's $7 Aussie, some zloty, euros. You can pay in euros, all different currencies.
Lots more rubles than it was before.
A lot of rubles. Don't pay in rubles. We don't want your money.
We don't want to be sanctioned.
We'll be grateful to have you though. So thanks very much. Goodbye.